I never thought I'd feel the sting of rejection from my own flesh and blood. But that morning, as I stood at the nursing home entrance, my breath turning to mist in the icy air, I realized just how far I'd fallen in my son's eyes. "We'll be back in an hour, Mom," they said, but an hour turned into a whole day. And as the hours dragged on, I stood there, wondering how it came to this. I'm Evelyn, a grandmother of 3, though these days, you wouldn't know it by the way my family treats me. I've spent my life raising my children, caring for them, sacrificing my own happiness to ensure theirs. My hair, now silver and thin, is a testament to the years I've lived, the stories etched in the lines on my face, the wisdom I've gained. But lately, I feel like I'm no longer seen. Not by my son, Ethan. Not by his wife, Claire. I never thought I'd find myself here, standing alone in the cold, outside a nursing home, waiting for a son who'd promised me the world, but now couldn't even promise me a warm place in his life. It's strange, really, how the weight of a lifetime of giving can leave you so empty. I gave everything I had to Ethan and Claire. My house, my savings, my time, my love. I made them a priority, even when I was sidelined, even when they barely noticed me. I put their needs first because that's what mothers do, don't they? They give everything for the ones they love, even if it means losing themselves in the process. But it was that morning, standing outside the nursing home, that I realized just how far I'd fallen. It wasn't just the cold that made my hands tremble, it wasn't just the snow that made my heart ache. It was the realization that after all the sacrifices, after all the years I'd spent building a life for them, there was nothing left for me. The promise of being part of the family, of sharing in their joy, was now a distant memory. They'd left me out. And for what? So they could live in their new world, with no room left for me. I couldn't shake the words that Ethan had sent me, cold as ice. "You won't be joining us. My wife prefers to keep it just family." For a moment, I stood there, feeling the snow falling on my shoulders like an unspoken judgment. It wasn't just the weather that froze me, it was the realization that I had been abandoned by my own flesh and blood. But it wasn't the end for me. No, this was the beginning of something else. The start of me reclaiming my life. I wasn't going to stand in the cold anymore. I wasn't going to let their betrayal be my story. I was going to rewrite it. For me. The next morning, I sat by my kitchen window, sipping on a cup of tea, the warm steam rising in front of me. But even as I tried to enjoy the comfort, the weight of what had happened still pressed down on my chest. I could hear the wind whistling outside, a reminder of the cold night I spent waiting for my son and daughter-in-law. The pain wasn't just physical. It was an ache deep inside, one I hadn't felt in years. The harsh reality of being discarded by my own family settled around me like an unwanted blanket. How could it have come to this? I had given everything for them. My savings, my time, my unconditional love. And yet, I had been treated as if I were an inconvenience, something to be left behind when I no longer served a purpose. They had moved on, building their life without me, as if I had never existed. But I would no longer let them control me, no longer let their neglect define me. The first step I took toward reclaiming my life was to call Mrs. Whitaker. She was an old friend, a woman who had known me for decades, someone who had always been there when I needed a listening ear. She wasn't one for flowery words or empty promises. She was practical, grounded, and wise. "Mrs. Whitaker," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "I need your advice. I'm feeling lost. I don't know what to do anymore." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the sound of her knitting needles clicking softly in the background. She was always busy with something, always knitting scarves for the local church or helping with community events. But she always had time for me. "You've always been a strong woman, Evelyn," she said, her voice steady, calm. "You don't need to let them walk all over you. You've given them enough. It's time for you to take care of yourself now." Her words were like a cold splash of water, shocking me into clarity. She was right. I had been walking on eggshells around Ethan and Claire, trying to please them, to make up for their shortcomings with my own sacrifices. But where had it gotten me? Nowhere but on the doorstep of a nursing home, waiting for a son who didn't care enough to show up. I think you need to take action, Evelyn, she continued. Start by seeing a lawyer. You've worked hard for what you have. It's time to protect yourself. I was hesitant. It felt wrong, like I was taking something away from them by making sure I was secure. But deep down, I knew that this wasn't about being selfish. This was about self-preservation. For too long, I had allowed myself to be trampled on in the name of family. Now it was time to stand up for myself. After hanging up the phone with Mrs. Whitaker, I made the call. It was to a lawyer I had met once many years ago, when I had signed the papers for my house. She was kind, professional, and I knew she would help me understand my options. As I sat in her office the next week, the reality of the situation hit me harder than I expected. The lawyer, a woman named Sarah, listened patiently as I recounted everything. The financial sacrifices, the long hours spent caring for Ethan and Claire, the unspoken expectation that I would always give without question. Evelyn, Sarah said softly, you have legal rights. This house, your savings, they belong to you. If you want to ensure you're protected, we can start looking into your options. You don't need to depend on anyone anymore. Her words were like a lifeline, pulling me out of the darkness. For so long, I had thought that if I just kept giving, kept being the dutiful mother and grandmother, everything would work out. But it hadn't. Now I had to put myself first. For once in my life, I had to stop being the martyr and start being the woman who took control of her own destiny. The process wasn't easy. It involved filling out forms, meeting with financial advisors, and preparing for what would undoubtedly be a long and painful confrontation with Ethan and Claire. But I did it. Every step, no matter how small, felt like a victory. I was regaining control of my life. But it wasn't just about the money. No, this was about something much deeper. It was about respect. About valuing myself enough to say, I am worth more than this. I wasn't just a source of income for them. I wasn't a placeholder in their lives until they decided I was useful again. I was Evelyn, a woman with her own life, her own dreams, her own worth. One evening, after several weeks of planning, I sat down and wrote them both a letter. I didn't know how they would react, but I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. The letter was simple, but every word weighed heavy on my heart. I had spent hours, days even, trying to figure out how to say what needed to be said. How could I express the years of hurt, the betrayal, without sounding like a bitter old woman? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't about bitterness. It was about standing up for myself. It was about ensuring that my voice, my needs, were finally heard. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, the same table where I had made so many family meals over the years. Meals for birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays. I had always been the one to serve them, to give them everything I had, without hesitation. Now, as I placed the pen to paper, I realized that this was the first time I had ever truly written for myself. The letter began like this: Ethan and Claire, I never thought I would be in this position, writing a letter instead of having a conversation. But here I am, and I need you to understand something. I have given you everything. I have given you my love, my time, and yes, even my savings because I believed in family. But today, I can no longer continue to give without being treated with the respect I deserve. I was left in the snow, outside the nursing home, with no explanation. My heart broke in that moment. Not just because of the cold, but because of the way I had been cast aside. I have spent my life making sure you both had what you needed, never once asking for anything in return. I thought you would be there for me, just as I was always there for you. But I see now that I was wrong. I am not your doormat, and I will no longer allow myself to be treated as such. I have spent far too many years sacrificing everything for you, for the both of you, and I will not do it anymore. My life, my choices, my happiness matter. I am taking steps to ensure that I am protected, that my dignity is not lost. I will no longer stand by quietly while you both use me, take me for granted, and leave me to wither away. This is not about the money or the house. This is about respect. This is about my right to live with peace, independence, and love. For myself. I am not asking for your forgiveness. I am not asking for your approval. I am simply asking that you see me, truly see me, and recognize that I am worth more than what you've allowed me to become. With love, Evelyn. I folded the letter carefully, my hand shaking not from fear, but from the weight of what I had just done. I had taken control of my own narrative, and it felt like a release, a long-awaited breath after years of holding it in. I placed the envelope in an old leather bag I'd kept for years, a keepsake from my younger days. That bag had seen its share of tears, of goodbyes, and of hope. Today, it would carry this letter to my son and his wife. But before I could send it, I had one more thing to do. I needed to confront them, not just with the letter, but with the truth. I needed them to hear my voice, to know that I wasn't going to let their neglect slip by without acknowledgement. A few days later, I called them both. I'd been preparing for this moment for weeks. I felt stronger now, like a woman who had finally stepped out from behind a veil of self-doubt. "Ethan," I said, my voice firm but not harsh, "we need to talk." There was a pause on the other end. I could tell he wasn't expecting it. There was no apology waiting, no explanation. But I didn't need either of those things. What I needed was for them to hear me, really hear me. "I know you've been busy," I continued. "I know you and Claire have your own life. But you need to understand something. I am not going to sit by and let you treat me like I don't matter. I'm done being the invisible one. I'm done being the one who gets left in the snow." I could hear him take a sharp breath, like he was trying to process the words. And I couldn't blame him. I had spent so long keeping my feelings buried. Now, they were coming out like a flood, unstoppable. "I'm sending a letter to you both," I said, my words careful, deliberate. "It's time you know what I've been feeling. It's time you understand that I won't let you push me around anymore." The silence on the other end was thick. I didn't expect an apology. I didn't need one. All I needed was to know that I had said my piece. "I'll be waiting for your response," I said, and then I hung up the phone. It wasn't as satisfying as I thought it would be. There was no moment of triumph, no victory dance. It was simply a step, one step closer to reclaiming my life, my worth, my peace. The days after that phone call felt different. I wasn't waiting for Ethan and Claire to come around or apologize, no. I wasn't going to sit idly by and hope they saw the light. I had made my decision, and now it was time to follow through. It was time to finally put myself first. I didn't hear from them right away, and that didn't surprise me. The silence between us had grown over the years, and now it seemed like it was stretching even further. They were avoiding me. Of that I was sure. I could feel it in the absence of phone calls, in the way the text messages had stopped altogether. But it wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. The next few weeks were a blur of legal consultations, financial meetings, and a determination I hadn't felt in years. I could still hear Mrs. Whittaker's voice in my head, telling me to protect myself, to stand firm. Every time I felt doubt creep in, I reminded myself of why I was doing this. This was about reclaiming my life. I deserved peace. I deserved respect. I met with the lawyer, Sarah, again. She was kind but no nonsense, and I appreciated that. She didn't sugarcoat things, and she didn't try to reassure me when I didn't need reassurance. She just helped me understand my options. We started the paperwork to secure my finances, to ensure that no one could take advantage of me again. I had put money aside over the years, saved for my retirement, and now it felt like I was finally protecting it. Not just for me but for my future. I couldn't let Ethan or Claire manipulate me any longer. This was mine. My hard work. My sacrifices. I would not let them go to waste. But as we filed the papers, I knew I had one last step to take. I had to confront them, face to face. I had to present them with the evidence, with the choices I had made, and let them know that this was the end of my silence. One afternoon, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I gathered my courage, put on my coat, and drove to their house. My heart pounded in my chest as I sat in my car in front of their home, staring at the big house they had built. The house that, just a few years ago, I had helped them get into. The house that was supposed to represent their success, their future. I felt nothing for it anymore, only the cold sting of betrayal. I rang the doorbell, my hand shaking slightly as I pressed the button. I heard movement inside, then the sound of the door unlocking. Ethan opened it, his face a mixture of surprise and something else, something I couldn't quite place. "Mom," he said, his voice guarded. "What are you doing here?" I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. He was still my son, yes, but he wasn't the same person I had raised. The love I once had for him was now tinged with hurt, with the realization that he had changed, and not in a way I could accept. "I came to talk," I said firmly. "I've been patient. I've waited for you to reach out, but now it's time for me to take control." I could see his eyes flicker with discomfort, but I wasn't going to back down. Not this time. "I've spoken with a lawyer," I continued, my voice steady. "I'm taking steps to ensure my future is protected. I've worked hard for what I have, and I won't allow you or anyone else to take that from me. Not anymore." His face flushed with anger, but I stood my ground. This wasn't about his feelings. It wasn't about my hurt. This was about me taking back what was mine. "I don't need your money, Ethan," I said, my words sharp. "I don't need your apologies, and I certainly don't need your manipulation anymore. What I need is respect. What I need is to be seen for who I am, not just as a means to an end." For the first time in a long while, I felt powerful. I felt like I had taken control of my own life again. The fear I had once had of losing them, of being alone, started to fade. They had already pushed me away, already shown me their true colors. But now I knew that I didn't need them to be happy. I didn't need them to be whole. "You've made your choices, Ethan," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Now I'm making mine." I turned and walked away from him, leaving him standing in the doorway, stunned. It wasn't a victory I'd been hoping for, but it was a victory nonetheless. A small one perhaps, but it was mine. As I drove back to my house, the wind in my hair and the weight in my heart slowly lifting, I realized something important. I wasn't just walking away from them. I was walking toward something better. Toward peace. Toward the woman I had always been but had forgotten for so many years. The days that followed felt like I was breathing for the first time in a long while. Each step I took in my own home, each decision I made for myself, felt like reclaiming a piece of the woman I used to be. The woman who hadn't been afraid to take on the world and make her own path. And for the first time, I allowed myself to feel what I had been so desperate to suppress. Peace. Not the fleeting kind that came from ignoring my own needs, but the kind that settled deep within, like a warm fire burning in my chest. For a few days, I kept to myself, just as I always had when things felt too overwhelming. The silence in the house was no longer a reminder of what I had lost, but a comfort, a gentle companion. I took long walks in the park, feeling the cool air on my face, listening to the birds sing in the trees. I used to take walks with Ethan when he was young, when he was my little boy who ran ahead of me, asking questions about everything. Now, as I walked alone, I couldn't help but reflect on all the years I had spent giving him everything I had, only to have him turn away when I needed him most. But I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer that woman. The one who waited, the one who was invisible, the one who apologized for existing. No, I was someone else now. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. I didn't know what to expect, but I had a feeling. It was from Ethan and Claire. I opened the envelope slowly, my hand steady, even though I could feel my heart beating in my chest. The letter inside was short, almost to the point of being dismissive. "Mom, we've been thinking a lot about everything you've said. We realize that we've made mistakes, and we're sorry for how we've treated you. We're hoping that we can work things out and move forward as a family. We want you in our lives, but we need you to understand that things will be different now." The words felt hollow. Things will be different now. Was that all they had to offer? After everything I had done for them, everything I had given, this was their apology? I should have been angry. But as I read the letter again, all I felt was a deep, quiet resolve. I had already made peace with the fact that things would never be the same again. And maybe that was okay. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their validation. I had found my own worth, and it wasn't tied to their perception of me. I folded the letter and placed it on the table. Then, I took a deep breath and let go of the tension I had been holding in my body. They had tried to take control of my life for so long. But now it was mine. I was not going to let their words dictate my happiness, my future. The next day, I called my lawyer. "I'm ready to move forward with everything," I told her. "I'm going to take the steps necessary to make sure I'm taken care of, no matter what. No one can take that from me." As we moved forward with securing my financials and making sure my assets were protected, I realized something incredibly important. The power to create the life I wanted was always in my hands. I had given so much to my family, yes, but I hadn't taken care of myself. And now I was doing that. I was taking the reins of my own future. In the following months, I started exploring things I had long forgotten. I joined a painting class at the local community center, something I had always dreamed of but had never made time for. I began traveling a little, visiting places I'd always wanted to see, like the gardens in Victoria or the quiet lakes up north. For the first time in years, I wasn't just existing. I was living. Then, one morning, as I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise over the horizon, I realized something even more profound. I wasn't alone. I had always thought that if I didn't have Ethan and Claire, I would be empty. But now I saw that I was whole on my own. I had friends who cared, neighbors who looked out for me, and most importantly, I had a new understanding of myself. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their apology. What I needed was to recognize that I had worth, just as I was. The years I had spent feeling insignificant were over. I had always been enough. The weeks drifted by, and with each passing day, I found myself becoming more and more comfortable in the life I had rebuilt. There were moments when I thought about Ethan and Claire. Brief flashes of their faces, memories that lingered, but I didn't allow myself to dwell on them anymore. They had their life and I had mine. My life wasn't about waiting for them to realize what they had lost. It was about embracing what I had, about savoring the peace I had fought so hard to reclaim. One afternoon, as I sat at my kitchen table, sorting through some old photographs, the phone rang. The caller ID read, "Ethan." I stared at the screen for a moment, unsure of how I felt. Part of me was still angry, but another part of me, the one that had learned to accept and move on, felt a strange sense of curiosity. Why now? Why after all this time? I took a deep breath and answered. "Hello," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Mom," Ethan's voice came through, low and hesitant. I wanted to apologize. I know it's been a while since we last spoke, but I've been thinking a lot about everything you said, about how we've treated you. And I realize now just how wrong we were. I'm sorry." I closed my eyes for a moment, hearing the apology, but feeling no rush to react. This was the moment I had been waiting for, or at least the moment I thought I needed. But it didn't feel as satisfying as I thought it would. There was no rush of relief, no sense of validation. It felt empty. "Ethan," I said, my voice steady. "I appreciate your apology. But it doesn't change anything. I've spent my whole life making you my priority, and in return, I've been left out, ignored, used. I can't go back to that. I won't." There was silence on the other end, and for a moment, I wondered if he was even hearing me. But I didn't falter. You had your chance to respect me, to include me. And now it's my turn. I've learned that I don't need your approval to feel good about who I am. I'm not the same woman I was when you left me out in the snow." The words hung in the air like a weight I'd been carrying for years, finally set down. "I understand," Ethan said quietly, his voice breaking. I don't know what else to say. I just want you to know that I regret everything. I'm sorry." "I know you are, sweetheart," I replied, softer now. "But I'm not waiting for your apology anymore. I've forgiven you already. For me. Not for you, but for me." I hung up the phone shortly after that, and as the silence settled around me, I realized something. The apology, as meaningful as it might have been to him, didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I had found peace on my own terms. I had learned to forgive, but I had also learned to let go of what no longer served me. I thought about the past, the years of sacrifice, the broken promises, the cold nights waiting for a son who never came. But then I thought about what I had now. My own strength, my own peace. I was enough. I didn't need to be validated by them or anyone else. The phone call had been a closure I didn't expect, a soft end to a chapter one had been desperate to close. But as I looked around my home, the paintings I'd created, the books I had read, the life I had built for myself, I realized that I had already won. I didn't need them to fix me. I had fixed myself. I had rebuilt my life, not from what they had given me, but from the strength I had found in my own heart. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months. There was no regret, no longing for things to be different. I had finally accepted that they would never be the family I had hoped for. But that didn't mean I had to shrink or wither away. I had given so much for them, but now I was giving to myself. And so, as the sun rose the next morning, I sat on my porch once again, the air warm with the promise of a new day. I was no longer Evelyn, the woman who had been left behind. I was Evelyn, the woman who had found her way back to herself. For the first time in a long time I was whole. And I was finally at peace. As the months passed, I began to embrace a life I never imagined for myself. In the beginning, I had been terrified of change, of what life would look like without my family at the center of it. But now, I saw that I had been wrong to believe that my happiness depended on them. My happiness depended on me, on the choices I made every day to live fully, to honor myself, and to embrace my own worth. I still thought about Ethan and Claire from time to time. The images of them, of my son as a child, of the love we once shared, were deeply etched in my mind. But those images no longer haunted me. They were part of the past, and I had learned to let go. I didn't need them to complete me. I had everything I needed within myself. One afternoon, as I was working in my garden, planting new flowers, I felt a sense of gratitude that I hadn't known before. The soil beneath my hands was rich and dark, a symbol of all the hard work I had done over the years. Not just in the garden, but in my own heart. I had nourished myself back to life, from the inside out. And in doing so, I had created a new beginning. I took walks now by myself, through the same paths I had once walked with Ethan. But I wasn't alone in the way I once was. No, I had company now. The company of my thoughts, my dreams, and the quiet peace that settled in my bones. I made friends, joined a local book club, and began taking trips I had always dreamed of. I traveled to the coast, where the waves crashed against the rocks in a symphony of sound. I went to the mountains, where the air was fresh and the world seemed to stand still in its beauty. I lived. One day, as I sat in the park, watching the children play, I received a call. It was from a number I didn't recognize. For a moment, my heart fluttered with the hope that it might be Ethan, but then I caught myself. No. I had to stop waiting for that. I had to stop waiting for the validation that might never come. I picked up the phone anyway, curiosity nudging me forward. "Hello," I said, my voice calm but with an edge of expectation. "Hi, Evelyn," the voice on the other end said. It was Claire. I had been expecting Ethan, but this call was from her. There was a long pause, and I could hear the hesitation in her voice. I wanted to apologize for everything. I've been thinking a lot about what happened. I see now that we've both made mistakes. And I've realized I've been holding on to so much anger. At you, at myself. I didn't know how to fix it, but I think it's time I started trying. I didn't know how to respond right away. Her words caught me off guard. She had always been the one who kept her distance, the one who built walls between us. But there was something different in her voice now. Something vulnerable. Claire, I began slowly, you don't owe me an apology. I've already forgiven you. And I think it's time for us both to move on. We can't go back to what was, but that doesn't mean we can't find peace with what we have now. There was a long silence, but this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with understanding. Claire had changed. I could feel it in her words. And maybe, just maybe, she had learned something from all of this too. I want to do better. Evelyn. I do. But I understand if you're not ready to be part of our lives again. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I took a deep breath, my heart finally beginning to release the tension it had carried for so long. I appreciate that, Claire. But I'm not sure we can just pick up where we left off. I found a new place for myself, a place where I'm okay with or without your apology. But that doesn't mean I don't wish you well. She sighed, and there was a quiet peace in her voice now. I understand. I'm glad to hear that you've found peace, Evelyn. I really am. We ended the call with a few more words of understanding, and I hung up feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Not from them, but from the need for their approval, from the constant ache of longing for a family that didn't understand me. I had built a new family, a family of my own making. Friends, neighbors, and the love I had for myself. That was enough. A few weeks later, I received a letter from Ethan. It was brief, but it was enough. He told me he had been thinking a lot about everything, and that while he didn't know how to fix things between us, he respected the journey I had taken to find peace. He wrote that he would always love me, but he understood that I had to live my life for myself now. I held that letter in my hands, the paper soft between my fingers. I had spent so many years waiting for this moment, for Ethan to see me, to finally understand. But as I read his words, I realized that the closure I had been waiting for had already come. It had come from within me, from my ability to let go, to stop waiting for the love that wasn't coming, and to start loving myself instead. I smiled as I folded the letter. The world felt different now. Lighter somehow. The sun had begun to dip behind the mountains, casting a soft golden glow over the small town I called home. I stood on my porch, taking in the view of the quiet street, the trees swaying gently in the breeze. I could hear the faint sounds of children playing in the park across the street, the hum of life going on around me. But for the first time in what felt like years, I felt truly at peace. There were no more unanswered questions. No more waiting for a son who had once been my world to come around. I had let go. I had embraced my own worth. It wasn't easy, though. Letting go of the past, of the dreams I had for my family, was the hardest thing I had ever done. I had spent decades working to keep everyone together, to hold the pieces of my family close, even when I was the one falling apart. But now, standing here, I realized something profound. I was not incomplete without them. I wasn't less than. I was whole. As the days passed, I started to shift my focus. The mornings were filled with walks through the park, where I would take the time to breathe deeply and let go of the lingering resentment. The afternoons, I filled with hobbies I had neglected for so long. Painting, writing, reading books I had forgotten about. I attended community events, finding a place where I was seen, where I was welcomed, and where I didn't have to apologize for being myself. I began to realize that while family was important, it wasn't everything. And the family I had longed for was not the family I needed to find peace. The peace I had been searching for had been inside me all along. One Saturday, I received an invitation from Mrs. Whitaker. She had invited me to join her for an afternoon at the local art gallery. It was something simple, but it felt like the perfect way to celebrate the woman I had become. The gallery was small, quiet, filled with paintings and sculptures that told stories of love, loss, and triumph. As I walked through the exhibit, I felt a connection to the art, to the creators who had poured their souls into their work. And I realized in that moment that I had done the same. My life, too, had been a work of art, shaped by my choices, my sacrifices, my strengths. Later that afternoon, as we sat in the cafe next door, Mrs. Whitaker looked at me, her eyes kind and knowing. "I'm proud of you, Evelyn," she said. "I don't think you realize just how strong you've become. You've fought for yourself, for your happiness. Not many people can do that." I smiled, the warmth of her words filling me in a way I hadn't expected. "I couldn't have done it without you," I replied, my voice soft. "You reminded me that I deserve peace. That I deserve to live for myself, not just for others." As the days turned into weeks, I continued to live in this newfound freedom. My relationship with Ethan and Claire didn't magically heal, but I no longer needed it to. They had their life and I had mine. I still loved them in a way. But love was no longer a chain that bound me to a past that was toxic. A few months later, something unexpected happened. Ethan called me again. This time, his voice wasn't filled with apologies. It was filled with something I hadn't heard in a long time. Understanding. "Mom," he said, "I've been thinking. I know things between us have been strained, and I know I've hurt you. But I want you to know that I've learned a lot from what's happened. I respect the strength you've shown. And, if you're open to it, I'd like to rebuild our relationship. Not because I think you owe me another chance, but because I want to be a better son." For a moment, I was silent. I had waited for this for so long, but now that it was here, I felt no rush to accept it. I had already accepted my own worth, and that was enough for me. "I appreciate your words, Ethan," I said, my voice steady. "But I need you to understand something. I've already healed. I've already found my peace. And if our relationship is to continue, it will be on my terms. I can't go back to what we were before. I won't." "I understand, Mom," he said quietly. "And I respect that. I just wanted you to know that I'm here, whenever you're ready." We ended the conversation on a note of understanding, but this time, I wasn't left feeling the weight of unfinished business. I had set my boundaries, and I had done it for myself, not out of anger or bitterness, but out of love for the woman I had become. As the months passed, I found myself becoming more involved in my community, creating the life I had always dreamed of. I took trips to places I had always wanted to visit, attended social events where I made new friends, and volunteered at the local shelter, offering the support I had always longed for but never received in return. I had become the woman I was meant to be, strong, independent, and most importantly, at peace. I had spent so many years waiting for my son and daughter-in-law to change. But now I realized that the only change I needed was within myself. I had learned that I was enough just as I was. And that, my dear friends, is the greatest gift I could ever give myself.